Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. For a number of months now, we have been working through a series of teachings on finding Jesus in the Old Testament. We've been looking at every single book of the Old Testament scriptures and seeing Jesus there. And to be honest, we're getting towards the end now. We're into what are known as the minor prophets. They're not called minor because they're less important. They're just those shorter prophetic books at the end of the Old Testament. And we're in the book of Amos at the moment. Amos, who was the burden bearer, that was what his name meant. And we saw last time how he represents Jesus, who is the great burden bearer that carries away our burden of sin. But there's another passage in Amos chapter 9, that speaks about God restoring David's tabernacle. But you see, Amos was from the southern kingdom, Judah, after the kingdom split in two. The kingdom was united under David. In fact, theologians use the term the United Kingdom when they're talking about the Old Testament. Now, that sounds a little bit strange to us because we think of the United Kingdom as being the UK, the Britain, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But no, the United Kingdom in theological terms refers to the nation of Israel when it was united as one kingdom before it split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. Israel had their capital in Samaria, Judah had their capital in Jerusalem. And Amos was from the southern kingdom of Judah, but went as a prophet to the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, one of the main contentions of where between the two groups was where they should worship. I mean, obviously, if you're setting up a separate kingdom, a rival kingdom, you don't want your people going back across the border to worship in Jerusalem all the time. And so, out of political expediency, the northern kingdom set up a center of worship in Samaria, and it began to be characterized by golden calves and stuff that harkened back to the bad old days of the idolatry that had cropped up so often in Israel's history. And so Amos calls them back not to Solomon's temple. Amos doesn't say, right, you've all got to get down to the southern kingdom and worship in Solomon's temple. Instead, he says the day's coming when God's going to restore their tabernacle of David. Now, of course, there was no temple in David's time. Solomon built the temple. In David's time, under the United Kingdom, the tabernacle was a tent. It was the tent of meeting, God's place, the tabernacle. There was a tent under Moses and that. When they traveled through the wilderness, they worshipped in a tent. And that was the same case. It was then set up in Shiloh and later set up in Jerusalem. But it was not a building made of stone. It was a tent that they worshipped in. And so God says through Amos that he's going to restore David's tabernacle. Now, this is very important because in the New Testament we find that Jesus is the true dwelling place of God among men. Now, he's going to build his church to be a temple, but Jesus himself describes himself as being like the tabernacle. And we find this, for example, in the book of John, John's Gospel. John's Gospel, chapter 1, you know that, where we're told that Jesus is the Word made flesh. The Word became, John 1:14, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, the Greek word translated dwelling here is eskenosen. And this is not the ordinary Greek word for house. The ordinary Greek word for house is oikia. So this is a different word. It's based on skene, which means a tent or a tabernacle. So we could actually translate John 1:14 as the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. Now, the tabernacle, in the sense of David's tent, where the Ark of the Covenant stayed, was never rebuilt. Solomon built the temple, and after that they rebuilt the temple a couple of times. But each time they built the temple, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there. God, the symbol of God's presence, was not in the place. That was lost under the Babylonian captivity. But Jesus fulfilled Amos's prophecy in his incarnation, not becoming a temple made out of stones, but being a tabernacle for us. The restoration, the Son of David became the restoration of David's tabernacle. And so Jesus fulfilled the promise that we find in Amos. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.